Quien no conoce su historia está condenado a repetirla.
Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria, a documentary on power, crime, and consequence. Opening.
Pablo Escobar. Pablo Escobar.
There are names that history records quietly, and then there are names that echo. Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria is one of them. For some, he symbolized fear. For others, controversy. For Colombia, a turning point that reshaped a nation's future. This is not a story of admiration. It is a factual account of how unchecked criminal power impacts society and why its consequences endure long after the headlines fade. Chapter 1. Early Life and Formative Years. Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria was born on December 1, 1949 in Rio Negro, Colombia, and raised in the city of Medellin. His father was a farmer, his mother a school teacher. Escobar grew up during a time of economic inequality and political instability. Opportunities were limited, crime, however, was not. As a young man, Escobar engaged in small-scale illegal activities, including contraband trading and document forgery. These early ventures introduced Escobar to a lesson that would shape his future. Illegal markets rewarded speed, risk, and intimidation. Chapter 2. Entry into the drug trade. By the 1970s, cocaine demand in the United States had increased dramatically. Escobar recognized an opportunity. He began coordinating transportation routes, smuggling cocaine from Colombia through the Caribbean and Central America, eventually reaching U.S. cities. Over time, Escobar became a central figure in what would be known as the Medellin cartel. At its peak, the organization controlled a significant share of the global cocaine trade. This growth was not accidental. It was systematic, organized, and increasingly violent. Chapter 3. Power, Wealth, and Public Image. Escobar's wealth reached unprecedented levels. According to public estimates, his organization generated billions of dollars annually. Cash was stored in warehouses, buried underground, and in some cases destroyed due to lack of storage. Yet Escobar sought more than wealth. He wanted legitimacy. He funded housing projects, sports facilities, and community initiatives in low-income neighborhoods around Medellin. To some residents, he appeared as a benefactor. To authorities, he was a criminal consolidating influence. Both perceptions existed simultaneously, and both were part of a calculated strategy. Chapter 4. Politics and Plata, or Plomo. Escobar entered Colombian politics in the early 1980s, seeking formal recognition and protection. When resistance emerged, he relied on a strategy that became infamous: plata, or plomo, silver, or lead. Accept financial incentives or face violent consequences. Judges, police officers, journalists, and public officials were targeted. The result was a period of extreme instability in Colombia, marked by fear, bombings, and assassinations. This era is widely recognized as one of the most violent chapters in the country's modern history. Chapter 5. Extradition and a personal fear. Despite his influence, Escobar had one overriding fear: extradition to the United States. He publicly opposed extradition treaties, believing incarceration abroad would strip him of all control. Escobar was known to say in Spanish, "Prefiero una tumba en Colombia que una cárcel en los Estados Unidos." Translation, VO, "I prefer a grave in Colombia to a prison in the United States." This statement reflected a mindset driven by control, not courage. Chapter 6. La Cathedral and Escape. In 1991, Escobar surrendered to Colombian authorities under highly unusual conditions. He was allowed to construct and reside in a private prison known as La Cathedral. The facility included amenities rarely associated with incarceration. However, reports soon emerged of continued criminal activity. When authorities attempted to transfer him, Escobar escaped. The search intensified. Chapter 7. The Final Manhunt. By the early 1990s, Escobar was isolated. Government forces, international agencies, rival criminal groups, and vigilante organizations all pursued him. On December 2, 1993, one day after his 44th birthday, Escobar was located in Medellin. He was killed during an attempted arrest. The manhunt ended, but the damage remained. Chapter 8. Legacy and Consequences. Pablo Escobar's actions reshaped Colombia's legal, political, and security systems. They also left lasting trauma. Thousands lost their lives, institutions were tested, communities were divided. Today, Escobar is studied not as a hero, but as a case study in the consequences of unchecked criminal power. Historical context. How cartels rise and why they fall. To understand figures like Pablo Escobar and the rise of global cartels, history must be examined beyond individual names. These organizations did not emerge in isolation. They grew where institutions were weak, where inequality was high, and where demand in global markets created enormous illegal profits. In the late 20th century, expanding international trade routes, limited economic opportunities, and widespread corruption allowed criminal networks to operate across borders. Cartels filled gaps left by absent governance, offering money where the state offered little. But this influence was never sustainable. Historically, every major cartel followed a similar trajectory. It began with small-scale operations, followed by rapid expansion, internal competition, and eventual fragmentation. As profits increased, so did violence. As violence increased, public attention and state response intensified. What seemed like strength was often instability in disguise. Escobar's organization, like others before it and after it, relied heavily on centralized control. When leadership was challenged or removed, the structure weakened. Power struggles replaced unity, and fragmentation led to further loss of life. History shows that criminal empires are not defeated by wealth alone, but by their inability to coexist with stable societies. They disrupt economies, undermine trust, and force governments to respond. Over time, law enforcement cooperation, policy reform, and public resistance reduce the space in which such groups operate. No cartel has ever outlived the society it tried to dominate. These lessons extend beyond crime. They reveal how systems function and fail. When opportunity is limited, illegal alternatives appear attractive. When education, transparency, and accountability increase, criminal influence weakens. History teaches that long-term change does not come from fear, but from institutions that work. The story of Escobar and world cartels is ultimately a study in imbalance between demand and consequence, power and responsibility, speed and sustainability. By learning from the past, societies gain the tools to prevent repetition. By understanding history, future generations gain the freedom to choose a better path.
Final act, when excess fades. For a time, the world saw only the surface: luxury homes, rare cars, private flights, and a lifestyle that appeared untouchable. From a distance, it looked like success, it looked like control. But appearances rarely tell the whole story. Behind the wealth was constant pressure, behind the power was isolation, and behind the image was a life that could never slow down, never rest, and never truly feel secure. No amount of money can remove consequence. No level of influence can guarantee permanence. History shows us that lives built on fear and excess often collapse under their own weight. What once looked unstoppable eventually faded, not because the luxury disappeared, but because the foundation beneath it could not last. True success is not measured by what is displayed, but by what endures, not by what is taken, but by what is built, not by how loudly power is shown, but by how responsibly it is used. When a life is defined only by excess, there is little left when it fades. But when a life is guided by purpose, integrity, and restraint, its impact can last far beyond the moment. The lesson is simple, and history repeats it often. Short-lived luxury can impress the world, but lasting legacy is what truly matters.
Title: The Illusion of Power, What the World Never Truly Understood About Pablo Escobar. Intro: The Mirage of a Man. History does not deceive us outright. It allows us to deceive ourselves. For decades, the name Pablo Escobar has been wrapped in myth, a symbol of excess, defiance, wealth, and fear. But what the world misunderstood was not the man alone. It was the illusion he mastered. Because power does not always announce itself with violence, sometimes it disguises itself as generosity, sometimes as inevitability, and sometimes as destiny. Part 1. The Most Successful Illusion. Many believed Pablo Escobar ruled through chaos. In truth, he ruled through structure. He understood something most never saw. People do not obey fear for long. They obey systems. His real strength was not wealth, nor weapons, nor notoriety. It was his ability to place himself between desperation and hope. To the poor, he appeared as relief, to politicians as leverage, to institutions as an unavoidable reality. This illusion made people believe he was above the state, when in fact he thrived inside the cracks of it. Part 2. Why he was never just a criminal. One of the greatest misunderstandings was labeling him as merely a criminal. That explanation is comfortable because it absolves society of responsibility. Escobar did not invent corruption, he exploited its existing architecture. He did not destroy institutions, he exposed how fragile they already were. Where justice was slow, he was fast. Where the state was distant, he was present. Where dignity was denied, he offered recognition at a devastating cost. This is why his influence lasted longer than his life. Part 3. The Illusion of Control. From the outside, it appeared Escobar controlled everything. From the inside, control was already slipping. Power built on fear must constantly escalate. Every act demands a larger one to sustain belief. This is the paradox people missed. The more powerful he appeared, the more trapped he became by his own mythology. He could not retreat, he could not normalize. The illusion required constant reinforcement until it consumed him. Part 4. The Unseen Cost. The most dangerous illusion was not Escobar's wealth, it was the belief that violence had a purpose. Generations paid for that illusion, communities normalized trauma, children inherited fear as culture. The tragedy is not only what he did, but what people came to accept as normal. When violence becomes routine, morality becomes negotiable. That is how societies fracture, quietly, gradually, invisibly. Part 5. The Lesson History Whispers. Pablo Escobar was not history's anomaly, he was history's warning. The illusion was never that one man was powerful, the illusion was believing systems could fail without consequence. When inequality deepens, when justice delays, when dignity is absent, power will always find a substitute, and it will never be benevolent. Conclusion: Seeing clearly. History's most dangerous figures are not those who terrorize openly, but those who convince people they are necessary. The illusion fades, the consequences remain. To understand Pablo Escobar is not to admire him nor to fear him, but to recognize the conditions that allowed him to exist. Because when we fail to understand the illusion, we risk rebuilding it under a different name.